It's time to get the inside info on BYU with Cougar insider Mitch Harper of KSLSports.com on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Oh, Cougar Tracks, Cougar Sports Saturday, you name it. It's got the word Cougar on it. Mitch Harper's going to be there across our stations and, of course, at KSLSports.com. Mitch, how's it going, man?
Going good, guys. Happy to be on with you.
First of all, congrats on rolling out another riveting, hey, what is the schedule going to look like? It's so hard to do the schedules because the schedule releases used to mean something because we could guess way better than we can now. And now we can't guess. I have no idea what to expect because the Big 12 has given us such wild results the last two seasons, the last three, however you want to look at it. I don't know what to expect, and I think this is just the real world of college football now is that schedules the rosters turn over so much that we don't know how to predict who these teams are going to be because they could be totally different from the team that they were the year before.
They really could, and the Big 12 is such a unpredictable league, but I get the sense that 2026 could be some predictability from this conference with BYU, who's established itself as a team that's won 23 games over the last 2 years. That was a program that followed up a big year in 2024 and was even better in 2025. And I think Texas Tech is here to stay in the Big 12. I think the rest of the league is one that could go a lot of different ways. I think it's continuing to get better, this conference. I do think this offseason, though, they took some hits with losing some quarterbacks to the portal that from a perception standpoint look like they're trying to quote-unquote level up. When you see Rocco Becht follow his coach to Penn State and Matt Campbell, you see Sam Leavitt leave Arizona State for LSU. But, the league still has some quality teams, and I think these teams have retooled nicely in the transfer portal, so it should be an exciting offseason once again.
As you're looking at BYU's schedule, what stood out to you the most?
I think what caught my attention was the midseason point of having Notre Dame, October 17th. That's a huge addition to BYU's schedule. They needed that. 2 years ago, they had the SMU game, which ended up being almost like a de facto playoff type matchup. But in the moment, I think many people, including myself at that point in early September in 2024, I thought it was two teams maybe just fighting for bowl eligibility. I didn't look at that as a playoff preview, whereas Notre Dame and BYU is going to have the potential that if they live up to the hype that they're already getting for 2026, that could be a matchup that is in the same breath as maybe BYU Miami 1990 in terms of the biggest games ever played in that stadium. And with the playoff as the backdrop, that's what BYU's doing here to retool and the run it back post that all these players had the past couple of weeks. They're in pursuit of winning a Big 12 title and getting to the college football playoff and getting a program like Notre Dame that regardless of their record, the name value is really strong in college football. That could be the type of game that gives BYU a little bit of margin for error in pursuing an at-large bid for the Big 12 or for the college football playoff.
When you look and you saw that Texas Tech, Utah and BYU are both avoiding Texas Tech, I guess. We do this thing where we go, oh, they have a soft schedule and these guys don't. I don't know if there's a version of that, but if you were to say that there is some predictability there, then where does BYU land on that side of the scheduling? Did they get a good go? Obviously, when you schedule good teams like Notre Dame, people look at that and go, that's going to be a challenge, although they get it at home this year. My question is do you look at this and say, hey, they got a better deal because they're not facing Texas Tech, or is the overall schedule still really, really difficult?
I think they got a pretty good deal considering no Texas Tech. And I think what's challenging about BYU's schedule is that they're going to play 9 consecutive weeks without a bye. They have the earliest bye in the Big 12. The only other teams that have that same bye as BYU are Arizona State and Kansas. And the only reason Arizona State and Kansas have that early of a bye is because they're playing in London the week prior. So BYU, for teams that are going to be staying in the U.S., they have the earliest bye among Big 12 teams. And that had to be probably created because of the unique scheduling logistics of adding Notre Dame to the schedule. And it's kind of interesting that BYU adds Notre Dame just weeks after, Brett Yormark was attacking Notre Dame about their complaining of the playoff, and then BYU signs up for the Irish. And BYU's always wanted to have Notre Dame in Provo, and there seems like there's a good history there of some of the games, but I never thought I'd honestly see the day that the Irish were coming back to Provo after the 22 years it's been since they rolled through LES. But I think BYU's schedule is pretty balanced. And you think about this past season where in their 14 games that they played, one being the Big 12 championship and being a bowl, they got on a plane 8 times. This year, they're only going to have 4 plane rides, and just things like that, I think, help the cause of not being tired at the end of the road, because you want to stay as fresh as you can be for potentially a Big 12 championship and maybe playoff run. So I think things like that are maybe underrated, that don't really pop when you see the schedule grid at first, but little things like that, I think, play a nice role in terms of a good draw for BYU.
What do you think about BYU and Utah being played on November 7th this year?
I think we shouldn't be surprised at this point. It's where it almost feels like we're maybe seeing a little bit of trends in year 3 of the 16-team Big 12. We're starting to notice that a little bit, where this game in Salt Lake City against Utah goes back to the same weekend that it did 2 years ago in 2024. The same for the UCF game that BYU has on October 26th, same weekend that they traveled to Orlando 2 years ago as well. Maybe we're seeing a little bit of trends there, or it's just maybe coincidence in how the schedule played out. But I think, it was interesting. Scott Draper, the chief football officer of the Big 12, explained that the reason that the rivalries are spread out in the Big 12 is the only one that consistently has been played at the end of the year is Arizona State. BYU and Utah during the Independence and Pac-12 years were played in August and September. So that whole decade plus of not playing this game at the end of the year took away the tradition element in the eyes of the Big 12. So now it just kind of gets put in a lot of different spots. So I'm okay with it. 2 years ago, this game delivered a really good TV audience for late night TV, 2 million plus. Thought last year's game on October 18th didn't get as big of an audience as you would have expected, considering all the pregame buildup and 2 ranked teams. Still only had a 2 million number in a primetime spot on network TV. But, BYU, Utah, it always delivers for people locally, and it'll be a great game. It'll probably be cold. Hopefully it's a, afternoon, late, early evening game. But, I think it's not surprising. I would have liked to have seen it, though, at the end of the year this season, because it could have been one more data point for either Utah or BYU to really punch their ticket into being an at-large team for the playoff, win or lose in the Big 12 championship if either team's lucky enough to get there.
Mitch, as you watch, these schedules roll out, and we have a look at what college football can be and how much the landscape of, the powers in college football has changed just in the last couple of years. A team like Indiana that has the second worst record in the history of college football, the second most losses in the history of college football, have turned things around at an insane pace. Is there a version of that happens? Is there another Indiana looming out there? And is there a possibility, are we really looking at a moment where college football shifts in its power because the talent is being spread around as much as it is?
I hope so, because I think it's just good for college football to have so many, different communities and states that believe there's a chance to win a title. And I think that just injects a lot of excitement and life into a program like BYU, that the belief is there, because you look at roster makeup, Indiana had 7 4-stars on this national championship team, 0 5-stars. You project to 2026 with BYU, they've got about 14 4-stars, 0 5-stars. That's a similar makeup, and BYU's got a coach that they believe in. They've got a culture. They've retained athletes. They haven't completely leaned into the portal to build up their roster. There's still that development piece and buying into culture, but identifying areas of need in the portal and going to get those guys to fill the gaps, like with Kato Luave from Cal, Walker Lyons from USC, fits like that just makes so much sense. They step in and feel like an instant upgrade for the spots that they're stepping into. So I think there's a good thing going for BYU. Now, there's always going to be the challenge of almost the perception of BYU, because the 4 years that Kalani Sitake has led BYU teams to an AP top 25 finish, all 4 of those seasons, they were not preseason ranked. There's only been one season under Kalani where BYU's had a preseason top 25 ranking. That was 2022. And that year they had maybe the worst defense in the Kalani Sitake era, and they made a change at that point. But there's never been preseason buzz, and that's what's maybe different about this year for BYU. And I think they should embrace the expectations, because I think this team's really good, and there's a real argument that they are the best team in the Big 12 in 2026. But I'd still give the nod to Texas Tech with what they've added in the portal, with their schedule. I think it's the easiest road in the Big 12, and all their tough games are at home, at least what we think are the tough games right now. But I just think there's a belief, there's hope for BYU, there's access. And if this playoff does expand to 16 with the deadline coming up on Friday for the playoff, even if it stays at 12, but there's still a path. And I think that's all you can ask for. You just got to find a way to get into that playoff, because BYU has kind of been boxed out. You know, they go get a win over a TCU to follow up a dud of a performance against Texas Tech and Lubbock. They beat TCU, who ended up being a ranked team, by 31. Didn't matter in the eyes of the committee, and things like that. Can BYU overcome that aspect? If so, you know, get into a playoff. Maybe they got a shot and they could go pull off the unthinkable, as did Indiana just a couple nights ago.
Mitch, the interesting thing about your gig, and as we watch this thing kind of roll out, everybody loves ranking, you know, where these, the transfer portal, recruiting classes are huge, right? Interestingly enough, though, a team like BYU, quote unquote, is, struggled in the transfer portal because they just don't add nearly as many people in a year like this, because a lot of their personnel sticking around. It's interesting to watch because both BYU and Utah return a lot of guys. Some people leave, but they return a ton of guys, and then they get dinged for it because they don't have a 30-person or 40-person turnover.
It is interesting, and I think sometimes the best gets are the ones that you keep, and, getting LJ Martin back, that's as good of a 5-star transfer addition or anything you're going to find in the portal. I mean, LJ Martin has the potential to be the best running back in BYU history, potentially, at least statistically, and everything's in front of him. Like what he wants to accomplish at BYU, he's got that opportunity as he runs it back. And, getting Bear Bachmeier to come back, and I don't think that was ever in doubt. I thought it was honestly kind of strange that he had to announce as a true freshman that he's running it back, because there was no indication that he was going to the portal. But I'm sure he got bogged down with people saying, are you coming back? Because that's just the world that this sport's in right now. But he comes back, and Glasker comes back at linebacker, Keanu Tanavasa, the secondary. BYU's got just so much retention right now. And I think the big question is obviously going to be with Kelly Papinga, defensive coordinator. I think it's a good system, but still he's going to be the defensive play caller to run the thing for the first time in his career. How does that go? Maybe there'll be some changes there. But from a personnel standpoint, yeah, BYU's roster is in a great position. And I think they've done a really good job of, turning to spots in the portal. It's been lighter in numbers. I think that's been a real recipe for success for BYU. You go back to the first year when they were in the Big 12, they had a massive overhaul. It was upwards of high 30s, low 40s of transfers. And they did that in an effort to kind of level up the talent base 1 and 2 to almost reset the kind of eligibility timeline of many players that they were recruiting. Before, it used to be get a guy, send him on a mission. He comes back, gray shirts, then he red shirts. You're talking about 4 years before a guy ever plays on the field at BYU. Now they're getting high school recruits. Yes, they might still go on a mission, but that's only, 2 years. They come back, and then they're expected to be contributors or at least competing for 2 deep spots. So when they did make that change with the Big 12 in 2023, that was a bit too much then. Ever since, they've kind of recalibrated and went more to 7 to 10 transfers, which I think is a sweet spot, because when you've got the talent and you want to retain those top guys, that's as big of a win anymore as anything in college football these days. And for BYU to retain these high-level guys that they did, who are all Big 12 caliber guys, it was impressive. And I think that gives BYU a chance to really dream big for 2026 going into next year.
You teased me last night, Mitch. You said you were going to come out with your way too early Big 12 power rankings. They are live right now on KSLSports.com. I've looked them over. Do you want to reveal your top 5?
I've got number 1, Texas Tech. I'm a big believer in Tech. Even though Brendan Sorsby, to me, doesn't scream $5 million man, but I think Brendan Sorsby is an upgrade from Baron Morton. Number 2, I've got BYU. 3, Arizona State. That might be a little bit of a surprise, but Kenny Dillingham, with the transfers that he added, I mean, the guy won still with Jeff Sims, with the exception being the Utah game, but that guy was still getting wins with Jeff Sims. I expect ASU to continue to operate at a high level, and retaining him was massive. Number 4, I've got Houston. 5, I've got Arizona, and then Utah right there at 6. The margin between 3 and 6 is really thin to me, razor thin. I put Utah at 6 because I still got a little bit of questions about just year one with Morgan Scalley, because it truly does feel like a year one now, whereas instead of just inheriting Kyle Whittingham's program and handing the keys off to him, I think it's a completely new deal. And that's where it feels like a little bit of a new head coach, new regime. And also defensively, Utah was giving up a lot of yards on the ground in the last 5 or so games, including the Nebraska game where they gave up about 160. And that one was, I'll give an exception there because that was such a crazy week. But even at the end of the regular season, that defense was giving up some yards and they lose some key guys there. So I got Utah at 6. But those are my top 6 teams. I think those are the teams that are going to be ones that are contending for the Big 12 title next year.
BYU got their record-setting win streak snapped by Texas Tech. Obviously, BYU's not very good. Is that where you got out of that game on Saturday, Texas Tech, Mitch?
You know, I looked at that game and I was impressed by BYU's ability to get a 9-point lead in that spot where it's about 8 minutes to go, 61-52. You know, BYU's got to get some more shooting around A.J. DeBonsa and Rob Wright. They don't have the 3-point shooting that you can count on every single night, as you've kind of grown accustomed to with BYU since joining the Big 12. You know, they've been sub 23% in the last 3 games. That has to improve because when you've got great passers like DeBonsa and Rob Wright, got to have some snipers around those guys, and they just don't have that right now. Kennard Davis is 0 of 10 his last 2 games. That's an area where BYU's got to get more production from Kennard Davis, who was viewed as a 3-and-D guy for BYU, and maybe someone that could one day be a 2-way contract type of player. They got to get more from him on the offensive end. But I think BYU's fine. They're still viewed in bracketology as a top 16 seed in many bracketology forecasts right now. And the nice thing about the Big 12 is in basketball is that you've got so many opportunities to really improve your resume and your seeding. I think that was the missed opportunity with BYU at Texas Tech was you're up 9, you've got 8 minutes to go. Go close the thing out and make a case that you're suddenly a 2 seed projected in bracketology, whereas now you're probably more in that 4 seed territory. But you got Arizona coming up on Monday. You got the Utah rivalry game on Saturday. Kansas is coming up. Huge opportunities. You win some of those, you're in that 3 seed, 2 seed territory because the odds would suggest, especially last year with it being the chalkiest tournament we've ever seen, got to be in that 1 to 2 seed line if you really want to get to the Final Four.
Mitch, we appreciate it. Thanks for all your help. Thanks for always dipping in and giving us a snapshot of BYU and what they're doing right now. Appreciate it. We'll be following, of course, KSLSports.com is where you can see the way too early Big 12 power rankings. On top of it, you can see all of Mitch's bylines there as he goes through with basketball and football and see where the Cougs shake out on all of it. Mitch, we appreciate it, man. Thanks again.
You bet, guys. Take care.
There you go.
Mitch.
Mitch Harper.